When you were a child, summer vacations felt endless. A single school year stretched like a vast horizon, each day packed with new experiences, new discoveries, and firsts that your mind could hardly process fast enough. But as an adult, suddenly decades seem to fly by in the blink of an eye. Years blur together, and even weeks can feel like mere moments. This is not just a poetic observation, it is a real phenomenon, confirmed by psychologists, neuroscientists, and anyone who has lived long enough to notice it. But why does time feel faster as we age? To answer this, we need to start with a simple idea. Our brains do not perceive time in the way a clock measures it. A clock ticks the same way for a 5-year-old and a 50-year-old. The seconds, minutes, and hours pass consistently. What changes is how our minds experience those intervals. Time is not something we feel directly. It is something we interpret, process, and store in memory. Our perception of duration depends on how much information we absorb, how novel our experiences are, and how our attention is engaged. Think about your first day at school. Everything was new: the classroom, the teacher, classmates, rules, schedules, smells, sounds, the sensation of writing your name for the first time. Your brain had to take in enormous amounts of information. And because it was all unfamiliar, the day felt incredibly long. Each event created a new memory snapshot that your mind could look back on. And the richness of these snapshots made time feel expansive. Compare this to a typical day as an adult: wake up, commute, work, return home, sleep. Most of the events are familiar, predictable, or repetitive. The brain creates fewer distinctive snapshots, so when you look back, or even experience the day in real time, it feels compressed. The same 60 minutes can feel vastly different depending on how much novelty your mind registers. Another way to think about this is mathematically. Suppose you are 5 years old. 1 year represents 20% of your entire life so far. Naturally, that year feels enormous, almost like a lifetime. Now consider someone who is 50 years old. 1 year is only 2% of their life. Even if nothing else changes, time will feel shorter because it is a smaller fraction of the total life experience. This proportional effect explains a significant part of why decades seem to pass faster as we age. Life itself does not accelerate. Our perspective on it changes. Attention, novelty, and proportion are only part of the story. Our perception of time is also influenced by emotional engagement, dopamine levels, and the focus of our conscious awareness. High engagement, surprise, or curiosity stretches subjective time, while routine, distraction, or mindless repetition compresses it. Childhood is naturally rich in these stretching experiences, while adult life often becomes dominated by repetition and predictability. This combination of proportion, memory, and novelty provides a scientific foundation for a phenomenon humans have observed for centuries: the faster passage of time with age. Understanding this does not solve the mystery completely, but it reveals a key truth: time does not change, but our experience of it does. And the way our minds interpret, store, and process moments is central to that perception. It is not just a matter of psychology, it is a reflection of how conscious systems interact with the world. Have you ever noticed how time seems to change as you grow older? When you were a child, a single summer vacation could feel endless, stretching across what seemed like an entire lifetime. Days were long, filled with new experiences and discoveries, with each moment seeming to hold a world of novelty. But as adults, we often feel like years pass in the blink of an eye, decades vanishing before we even notice. This is not just a poetic observation, it is a very real psychological phenomenon. Scientists in neuroscience and psychology have studied how humans perceive time, and their findings confirm what many of us instinctively sense. Our subjective experience of time accelerates as we age. But why does this happen? And what does it reveal about the way our brains interact with reality? To understand this, we need to start with the idea that humans do not experience time as a continuous, uniform flow. Clocks measure seconds and minutes consistently, yet our brains interpret these intervals in a highly flexible and personal way. Time is not sensed directly, it is reconstructed through memory, attention, and perception. One of the key factors influencing this perception is novelty. When we encounter new experiences, our brains create more detailed memories, recording multiple snapshots of each moment. This is why a child's day at school, full of first-time experiences, feels so long and full. Every new sound, every unfamiliar face, every novel activity registers as a rich memory frame, stretching the subjective experience of time. In contrast, adulthood is often dominated by routines, work, commuting, errands, and familiar habits. Days pass with fewer novel snapshots, and when we look back, weeks and months seem compressed. Another significant factor is proportion. A single year represents a much larger fraction of a 5-year-old's life than it does for a 50-year-old. At age 5, 1 year is 20% of your life so far. At 50, 1 year is only 2%. The same period naturally feels shorter as we age because our brains perceive duration relative to our accumulated experience. This proportional effect alone explains much of why decades seem to fly by compared to the endless summers of childhood. Attention and engagement also play a critical role. The more focused we are on the present moment and the more emotionally or cognitively involved we are, the longer that period feels. When children experience novelty and intense engagement, time seems to stretch. When adults repeat familiar tasks while distracted or preoccupied, time contracts. Dopamine and other neurochemical processes further modulate this perception, influencing how vividly moments are encoded into memory. Our minds are designed to highlight experiences that are important, unusual, or surprising, and to minimize the significance of predictable repetition. Understanding this phenomenon does not suggest that time itself changes. Seconds, minutes, and hours tick at the same rate for everyone. What changes is the lens through which we experience those ticks. Our perception of time reflects the unique way conscious minds interact with the world, combining memory, novelty, attention, and proportion to construct a subjective flow that grows faster with age. Recognizing this truth is both scientifically illuminating and profoundly human. To explore this further, imagine your life as a series of mental snapshots, like frames in a movie. Each time something new or significant happens, your brain takes a snapshot, storing details, emotions, and impressions. When you look back, the more snapshots you have from a given period, the longer that period feels. Childhood is packed with these frames. Learning to ride a bike, the excitement of first friendships, the thrill of new holidays, the first time you read a favorite book. All of these moments create vivid memories. Because each experience is unique, your mind records it in high detail, stretching your perception of time. Adulthood, by contrast, often lacks the same level of novelty. Weeks, months, and even years can pass without leaving a dense network of new mental snapshots. Tasks repeat, patterns settle in, and your memories form fewer distinguishable frames. When you look back, those years seem to have vanished almost instantly. Another way to think about it is with a simple analogy. Imagine a ruler representing your entire life. When you are 5 years old, a single year occupies a huge segment of that ruler. It feels significant, almost monumental. When you are 50, that same year takes up a tiny sliver of the ruler. It is not that time has changed, it is that the scale has. Your perception of duration is relative to the total length of life you have experienced. This proportional perspective helps explain why decades seem to accelerate as we age. Each passing year becomes a smaller fraction of your total experience, compressing its subjective weight. Attention and focus are crucial in shaping our perception of time. High levels of attention, curiosity, or engagement slow the passage of subjective time. When you are fully immersed in a novel experience, the brain records richer information, and the event seems longer. Low attention, boredom, or routine compresses it. Neuroscientists have found that dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to motivation and novelty, influences how the brain measures time. Moments with high dopamine activity are encoded more densely, creating a perception of longer duration. This is why vacations packed with adventure feel longer in memory, while monotonous work weeks blur together. Thought experiments can make this idea clearer. Imagine living a year where every single day is filled with something new, new skills, new faces, new places. That year would feel enormous because your mind would record countless snapshots. Now imagine living a year where every day is nearly identical to the previous one. Even though the clocks tick at the same rate, the year feels much shorter because your brain has fewer distinctive frames to process. This illustrates that the flow of subjective time depends not on seconds or hours, but on the richness of experience. This understanding reveals something fundamental about human consciousness. We are not passive observers of time, we actively construct it. Time does not pass differently in physics, but the way we perceive it is malleable, shaped by memory, novelty, attention, and proportion. As we age, the combination of fewer new experiences, less novelty, and a larger lifetime makes each year feel shorter. Recognizing this is both fascinating and humbling, showing that the mind itself is a key participant in the passage of time, not just a recorder of it. So far, we have explored how memory, attention, novelty, and proportional life experience shape our perception of time. But there is another layer to consider: the relationship between subjective experience and the physical nature of time itself. In physics, time is not something our minds invent. It is a dimension of the universe, tightly woven into the fabric of space. Einstein taught us that time is relative. It can stretch or contract depending on motion and gravity. Clocks moving at high speed tick more slowly, and clocks near massive objects tick more slowly. These effects are imperceptible in everyday life, yet they remind us that time is not absolute. It flows differently depending on circumstances, and in that sense, the universe itself is capable of subtle variability in time. Our brains, in contrast, create their own internal clock, one that is flexible, adaptive, and profoundly influenced by experience. Imagine two identical clocks, one inside your mind and one in the physical world. The external clock ticks steadily, unaffected by whether you are 5 or 50. Your internal clock, however, is highly sensitive. It measures time not by seconds, but by events, attention, and novelty. When your brain is flooded with new stimuli, time seems to slow. When your experiences are repetitive, time seems to accelerate. Feynman might have said that, while the universe gives us the canvas of time, our minds paint the experience upon it, and that painting is as real to us as any physical law. Consider a thought experiment. Picture a child learning a musical instrument for the first time. Each note is unfamiliar, each motion deliberate, each sound surprising. The child's internal clock records countless snapshots of novelty, stretching the perception of time. Now picture an adult practicing the same instrument after years of repetition. The motions are automatic, the sounds predictable, and the internal clock records far fewer distinctive moments. Physically, both spend the same amount of real-time practicing, but subjectively, the adult experiences time as moving faster. This illustrates how novelty and attention can amplify or compress perceived duration. Our understanding of time perception is further complicated by the fact that memory is not a perfect recording device. When we look back on periods of life, the density of memorable events affects how long that period feels. Childhood years, full of firsts and surprises, appear expansive in hindsight. Adult years, filled with routines, appear compressed. In this way, subjective time is reconstructed retrospectively as much as it is experienced in the moment. The brain is constantly balancing attention, novelty, and proportional life experience to produce the sensation of time flowing, and this balancing act changes as we age. This intersection of physics and psychology shows why humans struggle to explain the phenomenon fully. Objective time is constant, subjective time is emergent. Our minds are not passive observers, but active participants, constantly interpreting, encoding, and reconstructing experience. What we feel as the accelerating passage of time is a product of both our internal processes and the way we relate to the vast, unchanging flow of the universe. Understanding this does not eliminate the mystery, but it illuminates why time feels faster as we age, and how intimately consciousness is tied to the perception of reality. Now that we've explored how novelty, memory, attention, and the relative scale of life affect the perception of time, it becomes clear why adults often feel as if years pass in the blink of an eye. Life does not objectively speed up. Our minds simply process it differently. The brain is constantly compressing experiences that are repetitive and expanding those that are new or meaningful. Childhood is naturally dense with firsts and surprises, so the subjective clock moves slowly. As adults, routines dominate, repetition becomes common, and our mental timeline feels shorter, even though the physical time has not changed. Imagine walking through a city for the first time. Every street corner, sign, shop, and passerby is a new stimulus. Your attention is drawn in multiple directions, your brain records countless details, and time seems to stretch. Years later, walking the same streets becomes effortless. Your mind no longer needs to process all the details, and the journey feels faster. This analogy reflects how life unfolds as we age. Novelty is high early on and gradually diminishes. Attention is divided by familiarity and routine. Memory encodes fewer distinct frames. The cumulative effect is that time, as experienced, seems to accelerate. Neurologically, dopamine plays a crucial role. Dopamine is associated with attention, motivation, and reward, and it affects how the brain encodes new experiences. When we encounter novel situations, dopamine spikes, attention sharpens, and more detailed memories are created. These moments feel longer because the brain is actively engaged in processing them. Conversely, when we perform routine tasks, dopamine levels are lower, attention is reduced, and fewer distinctive memories are formed. The result is the sensation of time slipping by unnoticed. This explains why vacations packed with adventure feel long, but years of repetitive work or commuting blur together. There is also a cumulative proportional effect. A single year represents a large fraction of a 5-year-old's life, but a tiny fraction of a 50-year-old's. Each passing year is a smaller segment of the total lifetime, which compresses the subjective perception of time. The combination of proportional scaling, novelty, attention, and memory produces the familiar sense that life accelerates as we grow older. It is an emergent property of how conscious beings process experiences over time, rather than a feature of the universe itself. This understanding highlights the intimate relationship between consciousness and the perception of reality. Time, from a physical standpoint, remains constant. Seconds, minutes, and hours pass uniformly. Yet human experience of time is entirely constructed. Our brains actively interpret and reconstruct durations based on attention, memory density, novelty, and relative life proportion. The acceleration of subjective time is a byproduct of these interacting factors, illustrating the complexity of consciousness in a lawful universe. Feynman often emphasized that understanding a phenomenon requires examining both what we know and what we do not. In this case, we understand the mechanisms influencing subjective time, but the complete nature of how consciousness integrates these signals into lived experience remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of science. Recognizing this phenomenon changes how we view life itself. Instead of feeling powerless to stop time from slipping away, we can appreciate the role of novelty, attention, and engagement in stretching subjective experience. Life does not need to slow down. Our perception can expand when we actively seek rich, varied experiences. Understanding that subjective time is malleable is a profound insight, blending neuroscience, psychology, and physics into a framework that explains why life feels faster as we age. Understanding why time feels faster as we age opens the door to an even deeper insight. Humans do not merely experience time, they construct it. Our minds act like sophisticated internal clocks, constantly integrating information about the world, our attention, our memories, and the proportion of life already lived. Time is not just something that happens to us. It is something we participate in creating. Each passing moment is filtered through the lens of consciousness, and the richness or repetition of that moment determines how long it feels. The more novelty and engagement, the slower it seems. The more routine and predictability, the faster it flies. This is why the years of childhood feel almost eternal, while decades in adulthood appear to vanish in an instant. Consider another thought experiment. Imagine two people walking through life at the same physical pace. One constantly seeks out new experiences, challenges, and unfamiliar situations. The other follows a predictable routine with few surprises. Even if their biological clocks are synchronized and their days physically identical, the first person's subjective experience of time will be much longer. Their life will feel denser with events, richer with memories, and more expansive overall. The second person, in contrast, will perceive life as accelerating because the brain is not generating as many distinct mental snapshots. This demonstrates that the passage of time is not merely objective, it is deeply tied to how we choose to engage with the world. This perspective also helps explain why humans have struggled to fully articulate the sensation of accelerated time. Science can measure objective seconds, minutes, and hours, and neuroscience can track neural activity, dopamine levels, and attention, but the subjective experience of time emerges from the interaction of these factors in a conscious mind. It is an emergent property of complexity. This is why even brilliant thinkers like Feynman, who explored the deepest laws of physics, would admit that fully understanding subjective time requires bridging psychology, neuroscience, and physics, a challenge that continues today. It is not merely a philosophical question or a poetic observation. It is a scientific problem with profound implications for how we understand consciousness and reality. The relationship between memory, novelty, and the proportional scale of life reveals a subtle but powerful truth. Life does not accelerate because the universe has changed or because time itself moves faster. It accelerates because our perspective within that universe evolves. Each passing year becomes a smaller fraction of the total timeline we have experienced. Repetition and routine reduce the number of new memory snapshots, while novelty and engagement increase them. Our awareness, our perception, and our interpretation of events are as important as the events themselves in determining how long life feels. Recognizing this changes how we can approach our own experience of time. While we cannot physically slow the clock, we can influence our perception of it. By seeking novelty, engaging fully in the present, and creating memorable experiences, we can stretch subjective time and make life feel longer and richer. This understanding aligns with a deeper scientific and philosophical insight. Time is not only a measure of change, but also a reflection of consciousness itself. The acceleration of subjective time is a natural consequence of how the mind interacts with the world, an emergent feature of being a conscious observer in a lawful, predictable universe. As we reflect on how subjective time accelerates with age, an even deeper layer emerges. Time is not just a measurement of motion or change. It is also a window into the nature of consciousness itself. Our perception of time is not fixed, but arises from the interaction between the mind and the world. The brain actively constructs duration by integrating attention, novelty, memory, and proportional experience. These processes are invisible to the outside world, yet they shape our lived reality profoundly. A decade may pass in physical time, but for someone engaged in repeated routines, that decade may feel like a single chapter in a book, while for someone exploring new experiences, it can feel like an entire volume. This highlights the delicate interplay between objective laws of physics and the emergent properties of conscious awareness. Imagine life as a river. The flow of water is constant, moving steadily from source to sea. The river's speed does not change, yet the perception of its flow can vary dramatically depending on where you stand. From one vantage point, the water may seem to rush past, barely noticed. From another, every ripple, eddy, and swirl can feel slow and expansive. Our minds are like observers on the banks of this river, And the way we measure the passage of time depends on the richness of what we observe. Childhood is like standing at a vantage point where every detail matters. Adult life often resembles watching the river from a distance, where patterns repeat and the flow appears faster, though the river itself has not changed. This understanding also sheds light on why humans have long felt that life accelerates with age. It is not a cosmic mystery, but a natural consequence of how conscious beings experience a universe governed by consistent laws. The universe ticks uniformly. It is the mind that stretches and compresses those ticks according to attention, engagement, and memory density. Each thought, each new observation, each unique experience adds substance to the flow of time. The less we create, notice, and record, the faster the years seem to slip away. In this sense, the acceleration of subjective time is both a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge because it reminds us of our mortality, and an opportunity because it points to how we can shape our perception by shaping our engagement with life. Recognizing this truth has profound philosophical implications. It demonstrates that we are not passive passengers in the river of time. Consciousness itself participates in shaping the texture and density of our experience. The acceleration of subjective time is not a curse, but a reflection of the mind's intricate mechanisms for interpreting reality. It is a reminder that novelty, curiosity, and mindful attention are not luxuries. They are fundamental to the richness of life. By deliberately seeking new experiences, embracing challenges, and focusing on the present, we can influence how we perceive the passage of years, stretching moments into meaningful, vivid durations. Ultimately, this understanding connects the science of time perception to a deeper view of existence. Time does not slip through our fingers because of forces beyond our control. It appears to slip because of the way conscious beings interact with the flow of the universe. Feynman often emphasized the importance of seeing reality as it is, without illusions or unnecessary assumptions. By examining how attention, memory, novelty, and proportional experience shape subjective time, we gain insight not only into why life feels faster as we age, but also into the remarkable capacity of the human mind to experience, interpret, and influence the world. In this sense, the acceleration of time is a window into consciousness itself, revealing the profound interplay between the laws of physics and the nature of awareness.